Hello everyone, and welcome back to Cycling World. Make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and tell us what you think in the comments, because we have three major stories shaking up the peloton. First, Jonas Vingegaard is facing serious questions after bringing his 2026 season to an early end. The Visma leader will not race again this year, and his decision to stay away from competition until 2027 is now generating plenty of debate around his programme and what comes next. Meanwhile, there is another fascinating situation developing around Primož Roglič and Red Bull-BORA-hansgrohe, with the Slovenian facing pressure from the team and major questions surrounding his next move. We'll break down exactly what Red Bull expects from Roglič and why the situation could become increasingly important. And finally, it is now official. Isaac Del Toro will race the Deutschland Tour from August 19th to 23rd, arriving as UAE's leader and one of the big favourites for the overall classification. After blowing the Cyclassics Hamburg apart, the Mexican is already turning his attention to his next challenge. Vingegaard stops, Roglič faces pressure, while Del Toro keeps racing, and Germany is next. And we begin with Jonas Vingegaard because the Dane's decision to bring his 2026 campaign to an early end is creating a major debate around one of the biggest names in the peloton. Vingegaard will not race again this season following the broken collarbone he suffered in that brutal Stage 15 crash at the Tour de France, meaning we will have to wait until 2027 to see the Visma leader pin on a race number again. On one hand, the logic is obvious. Vingegaard required surgery, had already completed an enormous racing block, and there is little reason to rush back simply to squeeze another objective into the final weeks of the season. But that has not stopped questions being raised about such a long spell away from racing. By the time Jonas returns, he could have spent several months without competition, despite already being back in training. Gavin Quinn explained that he had effectively expected Vingegaard's season to be over from the moment of the Tour crash, arguing that there was little reason to force a comeback for the World Championships or Il Lombardia. But Ruben Silva went even further, discussing the wider questions surrounding Vingegaard's future, and even acknowledging that, while retirement would appear extremely unlikely, he would not completely dismiss the possibility. That debate becomes particularly interesting because Jonas has previously spoken about wanting a better balance between racing, training, and his personal life. Remember, this is still a rider under contract with Visma until 2028 and coming off a huge season in which he won Paris-Nice, the Vuelta, a Catalunya, and the Giro d'Italia before sitting second overall at the Tour. Vingegaard has nothing left to prove, and now to Primož Roglič, because his situation ahead of the Vuelta a España is becoming one of the most controversial stories before the Grand Tour gets underway on August 22nd. According to reports, Red Bull-BORA-hansgrohe want Roglič on the start line despite an extremely disrupted build-up and only 28 race days in his legs this season. The Slovenian was hit by a vehicle while training in Salzburg in July, injuries that forced him to miss both the Clásica San Sebastián and the Vuelta a Burgos, two races that would have been important stepping stones towards the Vuelta. That leaves Roglič heading into Spain seriously short of racing, and questions are being raised over whether he can realistically challenge for the red jersey. Roglič is a four-time Vuelta winner, and his motivation for returning was obvious. A fifth overall victory would move him clear of Roberto Heras and make him the outright record holder. But this is far from the preparation he would have wanted. Reports suggest Red Bull still expect him to race, potentially shifting the focus towards hunting stage wins if the GC battle proves beyond reach, and that creates an uncomfortable situation. Roglič is being asked to tackle 3 weeks of Grand Tour racing without the ideal preparation and with major uncertainty surrounding his form. His contract with Red Bull expires at the end of the year, adding another layer to the story. The big question is whether Roglič can somehow ride himself into contention, target stages, or eventually pay the price for such a difficult build-up. A four-time champion is heading back to his favourite Grand Tour, but this time the odds appear stacked heavily against him. And while Vingegaard steps away from racing and Roglič heads towards the Vuelta with major questions surrounding his preparation, Isaac Del Toro is going in the opposite direction because his next challenge is now confirmed. The Mexican will line up at the Deutschland Tour from August 19th to 23rd, and after the level he has shown recently, he arrives as one of the main favourites, arguably the rider everyone will be watching in the battle for the overall classification. Del Toro comes into Germany with 9 victories already this season, and fresh from an incredibly aggressive performance at the Cyclassics Hamburg, where he blew the race apart on the final Wasserberg despite the parcours being much better suited to the sprinters. Now, the terrain changes, and so does the expectation. This time, Isaac will have several days to make the difference, and UAE are expected to back him as their main GC card. The opposition will be serious, with riders such as Giulio Ciccone and Giulio Pellizzari among the names capable of challenging him when the road starts going uphill. But Del Toro has shown that he can win in different ways. He can climb, punch over short hills, attack from distance, and still produce a strong kick after a hard day in the saddle. And there is another important element. The Deutschland Tour is part of his build-up towards the World Championships in Canada. Isaac is clearly looking for race rhythm rather than hiding away in training. But judging by his mentality, he will not be heading to Germany simply to get kilometres in the legs. Del Toro starts as one of the biggest favourites, and from August 19th to 23rd, he will be racing to win. And when we put all three stories together, we are looking at three completely different situations for three of the biggest names in the peloton. Jonas Vingegaard has decided to shut down his 2026 campaign and focus entirely on recovering, rebuilding and preparing for next season. After everything he achieved earlier this year and the broken collarbone that ended his Tour de France, that decision is understandable, but it has also triggered plenty of questions about such a long spell away from racing and what his 2027 programme could eventually look like. Primož Roglič finds himself in almost the opposite situation. The four-time Vuelta champion is heading towards the Spanish Grand Tour after a far from ideal build-up with just 28 race days this season and his preparation badly disrupted by that training incident in July. Red Bull want him on the start line, but nobody really knows what version of Roglič we are going to see. Can he somehow ride himself into form? Can he hunt stages? Or will 3 weeks simply prove too much after such limited preparation? And then there is Isaac Del Toro. The Mexican keeps racing, keeps accepting challenges, and will now head straight into the Deutschland Tour from August 19th to 23rd as one of the biggest favourites for the overall victory. After lighting up Hamburg with that huge Wasserberg attack, Del Toro now gets a parcours where his all-round ability could become an even bigger weapon. Ciccone and Pellizzari will provide serious opposition, but UAE are bringing Isaac with genuine ambitions. And with the World Championships in Canada still ahead, every race is another opportunity to sharpen the legs. Vingegaard stops, Roglič heads into the unknown, and Del Toro keeps building momentum. Three very different paths, and over the next few weeks we are going to find out which one pays off.